Dear writer, you need to quit. This is the show that helps you know what to quit, what to keep, and what to question. My name is Becca Syme, and I'm a Gallup certified strengths coach with thousands of hours of coaching 6 and 7 figure authors, mid-listers, major award winners, and new authors alike because everyone needs to quit something. Anyone can tell you what worked for them, and of course, they say it might not work for you, but they can't tell you why. Well, I can tell you why. Welcome to the QuitCast. Hi, everybody, and welcome to episode 35 of the QuitCast. Today, we're going to be talking about planning for 2020. And this will work for any year, but it just happens to be 2019 today, and it's going to be 2020 in just a little bit. And we want to talk about how to plan or whether or not you should be planning for 2020 and what does that look like. Everybody wants to get more done, right? And so we want to think about, how do I get more done in the year? Is planning going to be a part of it? So just a quick reminder, we did a QTP episode on whether or not you can expect planners to make you productive. And I'll link to that in the show notes. But before we get started, I just want to quickly say that the Dear Writer, You're Doing It Wrong book has officially released, and the cover's also behind me. And if you are interested in knowing more about the subconscious processes that govern your decision making as a writer, that's what I attempted to cover in this book. If you've already read it and want to shoot a review up there, please do. We're looking to help the readers who need this book find the right book for them. It's an important follow-up to Dear Writer, You Need to Quit. But today we're going to be talking about planning. And specifically, I want to question the premise of whether or not you can expect planning your whole year out to work for you as a way to help you be more productive. Because we all want to get more done, right? That's the initial class that I started teaching, was Write Better Faster, and everybody was interested in how do I get more done, right? And that hasn't really changed a lot in the many years since I started teaching that class. And so I want to talk about planning as a method for productivity. Can I expect planning to make me more productive? Has planning ever helped you to be more productive in the past? And this seems like it's not rocket science, but if a planner has never worked for you before, there's not a good chance 2020 is going to be the magical year that it's going to work. And it's not the fault of the planner system that you're buying. It's not the fault of all the people who are creating the planners, and it's not your fault either. And this is important in an alignment perspective to get our heads around this. It's not that the product silver bullet is out there and you haven't found it. It's that the alignment between you and the process of using a paper planner or using a long-term planning system is not a good fit. And we need to find a different way to help you get done what you need to get done. So we're going to talk first about if planning has not worked for you in the past, and then we're going to talk about if it has. And so if it has worked for you in the past, just hang on, we'll get to you. There are QTPs about that as well. So if planning has never worked for you in the past, then how do you become more productive? Well, it's important to understand the way that your brain receives pressure and how it decides how to get things done. If you're a person who's extremely externally motivated, then you're probably going to be motivated by things like deadlines. If you are internally motivated, then you are going to decide that you want to get a specific thing done. But if you're not long-term motivated, so for instance, if the thought of oncoming pressure or oncoming deadlines down the road a year is not real to you, then you need to focus on what is emotionally real, what feels the most expedient use of your time. If planners haven't worked for you, there's usually a reason. And again, we talk about this in the QTP episode, so I'd suggest to go back and look at that in more depth. But specifically, the reason that I don't encourage long-term planning for everyone is that not everybody needs to execute the plans that they make. And I know this sounds very strange, like it can't possibly just be this easy, but long-term planning literally doesn't work for everyone. Knowing where you want to be in 10 years or having a goal for yourself doesn't actually work to keep everyone motivated, because everybody's brain has a different relationship to whether or not goals make them more likely to, setting goals makes them more likely to accomplish them. So it's really important to look back on your past history and see, and of course, if you've taken the Strengths Finder test, you know, do you have high focus? Do you have high achiever? Like those are some of the strengths that tend to be better with setting goals and achieving them and wanting to, check things off lists. And do you have a higher futuristic? Do you have a higher strategic? Are you more motivated by what you see in the future? And if you aren't, if that kind of thing doesn't motivate you, then maybe you don't need to plan out your 2020. Maybe it's more important for you to focus on creating a regular habit for yourself. Again, I'm not saying daily, because there's nothing righteous about daily writing, but a lot of you do write every day and you feel more comfortable writing every day and focusing on spending time in your manuscript or on your fiction platform every day. And that's what's going to motivate you to keep going, is that constant momentum of accomplishing something all the time. And what you want to be more cautious of, if you are a person who long-term planning does not work for you, that means that there isn't a sense of pressure when you say you're going to do something in 2 months. There's no pressure inside your brain in the immediate moment when you're deciding whether to check your email or not, or when you're deciding whether to watch Netflix or not. There isn't enough pressure in your brain just by setting that long-term goal. Whether you write it down, whether you tell someone or not, sometimes it just doesn't matter. Sometimes what you need to think about instead is, in the moment, am I making the best decisions for myself on a daily basis, right? So let's just say, for instance, that you're not a long-term planner. And let's say that goals and visions of the future don't inspire you or create any pressure for you at all. Well, then the immediate moment, what's happening right now, and how you are gratifying your urges, that makes much more difference in how you spend your time. So the fuller your plate is, the more other pressures there are on you immediately, the less likely it is that something that you said you would do in a Facebook post is going to randomly make you decide to sit down and write, right? Or something that you wrote down in a paper planner that you have now closed and put on your desk, ne'er to open again, is going to make you sit down and write. And so you want to think about the first question: are there any barriers or hurdles to my sitting down and writing consistently? If, for instance, you don't have a lot of time, then you have to make hard decisions about, am I going to try to create more time to write? Or am I going to stop making myself feel guilty for not writing? Because those two are both equally valid options. Sometimes it actually is a good thing for us to decide that we are not going to pressure ourselves to sit down and write, because there's just too many other things going on and we have other priorities, and everyone else's priorities have to be ours in that moment for whatever reason. We might be in crisis, there might be a big move coming up, somebody might be sick, there might just be a lot of life to do. You might be in transition and adjusting to something. So you never know for sure on an objective level that these goals that you're setting for yourself are actually accomplishable in the moment, because you have to look at, do I really have time on a daily basis to get this done? And so that's the first question you have to ask, is, are there any barriers to my writing? The second question you want to ask is, are there any opportunities that I'm not taking advantage of? So for instance, if you are the best at writing in the morning, but you have been reaching for your phone and wasting a couple of hours on social media and email in the morning, and you're not getting up and writing, you should make a goal for yourself on a daily basis. Again, this is the pressure, is I'm going to do this. When I wake up tomorrow, I'm going to wake up and write. Whatever time it is that you get up, I don't care. It doesn't have to be 4 o'clock in the morning. All I care is, if you are a daily pressure prompted by your environment person, then you need to make sure that you're only changing one thing. First of all, again, I know I say this a lot, only changing one thing, and that you're intentionally reminding yourself every day that this is your thing that you want to do. You want to do this every day. And don't worry about how many books you're going to get done in 2020, and don't worry about what your production schedule is going to look like and all this stuff. You can worry about that at another time, but you want to try to get this regularity going if that's what your big goal is. And so again, for me, that there's so much that's important about understanding you have to set smaller goals. Not smaller in the sense of not grandiose, because you may still have grandiose visions for what you want to get done. But if you are not prompted by your vision long term and your goals and that sort of thing, you have to remember that the pressures that are coming at you that are keeping you from writing are making pressure every single day. And so you have to make that pressure right on back. And so there's a couple of things I suggest for people who are this type of wiring. The first is you have to learn to see the environments that are stealing your time as dangerous environments instead of friendly environments. So you have to stop seeing things like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, email, etc. as, oh, I'll just do this really quick. Oh, it's just fine. It's just fine. That's how we talk about things like chocolate cake or the gateway drugs or something. It's like, oh, it's not a big deal. It's just whatever. It's blah, 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 right? Like, you want to not go to the place where you are minimizing the impact of those pressures on your productivity. And so if you start thinking of them as not as friendly, instead of saying, oh, let me just check this really quick, it's not a big deal. That's the tone in your voice when you're saying, let me just check this really quick to yourself. You're saying, oh, it's not a big deal. Facebook is harmless. So, okay, so Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, it's not just Facebook, it's anything, any social media that's designed to keep your eyeballs engaged because they make money off of you. It's not harmless. And so you need to start seeing and switching the opinion that you have of those things into a place where you now see them as dangerous environments. So for myself, I think of them physically as being hot lava. Like, I don't want to spend a lot of time around hot lava, really zero if I can help it. But I think of them as a danger zone and not as a, oh, it's not a big deal, it'll just be really fast. So that's a big switch that I think we need to make in general. That's not just for short-term planners, it's for long-term. And then the second thing I want to say is, it's possible that you're just trying to do too much and you're not aware of how much you're capable of getting done. So if you are not a long-term person, if you're not a paper planner person, you're not going to open that planner after the first couple of weeks of January, then don't even use it. Focus on instead, how can I create regular pressure for myself to stay out of the environments that are dangerous and to prioritize my writing? Those are the only two things that I want you to focus on. Stay out of the environments that are dangerous and prioritize the writing. And anything else at that point is gravy, because you don't want to get too wrapped up in things that are not actually going to help you long term succeed. Okay, now, if you are the kind of person for whom long term planning has worked in the past, there are a few things that I want to say about the productivity that you can expect in 2020. And there's some questions that I need to ask you about yourself and your productivity in the past, right? The first one is, do you always reset the goalposts? Do you always feel like every time you accomplish something, you're constantly feeling like, okay, great, now what's next? What's the next big thing? If this is common for you, that you always do that every time you accomplish something, there's a good chance that you are never going to really feel like you have achieved or attained the goals that you set for yourself. Not that you don't complete projects, because I'm sure you do, and not that you don't get a lot done, because you get a ton done. But the difference is you never feel like you've accomplished everything that you set out to accomplish. And part of that is because you innately feel like you can get more done than you actually can get done. But it's partly that phantom plate, we call it the phantom plate of unfinished tasks. It's partly knowing that phantom plate is there that drives you to accomplish more and more with your time. And so if you are one of those people, then knowing that that is a driver for you, I would go ahead and set the goals the way that you've always set them. Use the things that have helped you to be successful in the past, and don't go looking for a new system that's magically going to help you get everything done that you could possibly ever want to get done, because that thing doesn't exist. You'd be better served, instead of trying to learn a new system, by just continuing to do what you have done in the past, because there isn't going to be a system that will magically make you accomplish absolutely everything you've ever wanted to do. That doesn't exist. By nature, you are a person who wants to do more than they can do, and that desire makes you strive to continue to do more and up the bar. And I will say, if a particular system feels outdated for you, or it feels like it's absolutely just not working, then by all means go ahead and find something new. If that's your nature to go look for the new thing, then please do that. That's a strength behavior. I'm fine with that. But as far as just looking for the next thing that's going to make you magically get everything done, there's no such thing. Do what has helped you to be successful in the past, and use that time to continue to get more and more done. And part of knowing your strengths as well is being both satisfied with and happy about the fact that you will constantly be striving to want to get better and better and better, and that that actually generates life for you and it doesn't stress you out. So those of you who are listening to this who don't have those traits and it's stressing you out to think about that, that's okay. It's not you. You don't have to worry about that. But the people who are wired this way, they get so much energy from stretching for the next thing. And so that's the first type of person who is a long range planner that I want to talk to today. The second type of long range planner that I want to talk to is the person for whom a planner system has worked for in the past, but life has changed somehow. You're not getting as much done. You're feeling more weighted down or perhaps stressed out by all the things that aren't being accomplished. To this person, I want to say it's probably not the planner system that is the problem. More likely than not, it's that life has gotten crazy, or people are expecting too much from you, or your time has changed, or your health has changed, or your biology or something has changed, your environment, and it's making it not as possible for you to get as much done as you used to be. You might be on the slide down towards burnout, in which case, go watch the burnout videos. We'll link to those as well. But there's a good chance that if planners have always worked for you, unless you've had some kind of brain injury in between the two, and then we want to have a different conversation. But there's a good chance that if planners have worked for you in the past, but they're not currently working, that there's something else going on. There's an environment discussion or an energy discussion that we need to have, and that you need to allow yourself to be wherever it is that you are and accept what's happening, and then work with whatever the situation or circumstances are that are happening to you, and see how to be as productive as you can be with those new situations. I'm not saying it's easy or that it won't be painful, but finding a better planner or a new system is not going to change the fact that you just moved across the country, or that someone close to you passed away, or that you have been going through perimenopause or menopause, or that you are ill physically, or you have a chronic illness. It's, a new planner is not going to change any of that stuff. So don't address the wrong problem, right? Address the problem of, how do I work with whatever it is that's going on right now? And how do I expect something from myself that's as realistic as I can, that won't push me into stress mode, but that won't allow me to just not get anything done because I still want to be as productive as I can. That's commonly what goes through the head of the person who's in this category. And I want to be careful. I'm so sorry that what happened has happened. And it's not minimizing anything that you've gone through or anything that has happened to you. But if you want to continue to get work done, you have to shift out of the expectation that it's not going to impact you, that somehow moving shouldn't affect what's going on, or biology shouldn't affect, because that unrealistic expectation is going to cause more stress than it's worth. Because if you can accept what's happening and then deal with whatever the reality is, feel all the feelings by all means. I mean, I'm not saying don't grieve or don't pause or any of that, but feel the feelings, but don't expect yourself to do something that you can't do, because that's just an exercise in insanity. You're going to drive yourself crazy trying to expect yourself to do something you're not capable of doing. So that's that second category of person for whom long-term planning can work. The third category of person is the person who constantly has a moving target of the future. And this is different than moving the goalposts every time you achieve something. This is a person for whom the future is always a live entity. It's always sort of a moving target. And you do your best work when you vision your way to the future and then start accomplishing that. And then in a little bit, for some people, it's a few days, for some people, it's a week or a month. You revision the future and you keep moving towards that target. And so for people that like long-term planning, but they don't execute the individual plans to fullness, they only execute for a short term and then the plans change, they often feel like there's something wrong with them. And there isn't. It's a way of being oriented towards the future or being strategically oriented that it is normal and good. It's a strength behavior. We want to encourage that. But that does sometimes mean that you're going to set goals that you don't end up needing to accomplish because the future always changes. And so depending on where that's coming from, a strategic, an adaptability, a futuristic, a context, it can come from many different places, deliberative. Depending on where it's coming from a strengths perspective, you want to act differently in those situations, but it's always going to be a little bit of a moving target. You may be the kind of person who makes year-long plans and then remakes them in February and in March and in June, and that's fine. However long it lasts until the future changes, do that. But that does mean that paper planners may not be as effective in the long term, and you may buy a few different planners throughout the year every time you change your plans, and that's fine. I think that those kinds of investments, if they feel worth it to you, are worth it, because it's all about whether you believe that spending the money is going to help you or not. But is there ever going to be one planner to rule them all? No. I happen to be a person who's in this particular category where the future changes constantly. And what I started doing was using digital planners instead of paper so that I could change them all the time. And so now my writing calendar is in Excel. It's mobile. My assistants have access to it. They can always see what's going to happen. And every time it changes, then they kind of laugh at me and say, oh, well, this is just Becca being Becca. And, it's a totally different plan in March than it was in January. And that's normal. And the other piece about this is if you happen to be wired that way, helping other people to understand that that is how you're wired will be important, so that people aren't making plans for 2 years from now that you're pretty sure are not going to get accomplished the way that they are on paper today. So it'll be important for you to help other people understand that particular part about you when you're working with others. So regardless of whether planning has worked in the past or not for you, and whether or not you're going to try to plan 2020, I want to say one quick thing. If you are planning to change something in 2020, please consider narrowing the focus of the change and not trying to change everything. 2020 might be the year that you decide that you're not going to try to lose weight anymore and you're not going to try to go to the gym anymore because there's something that's more important for you. If it's been every single year of your life that you have had a goal on your January goals and it continues to not get accomplished, let's look at, for me, two things. One, do you really need to do it? Is it something that's absolutely necessary for you to do? And if it is, then what are you going to give up that you're already doing in order to make that happen? Here's just a for instance. If you want to lose weight and you haven't in the past because you can only make it so far into a very restrictive diet because you really like food, are you willing to give up the food that you love in order to long-term maintain a weight loss? If you're not, then consider if there's a different way to go about that. Is there something else that's frustrating you? Are you foggy because you eat carbs all the time? Are you, addicted to sugar? Is there something else going on? Or potentially, do you need to give up eating the foods that you love in order to stay healthy. I'll be honest, I'm at an age where that's something that I'm having to consider. And I had a conversation with a friend the other day who's about 10 years older than me. And she said, when I was 20 years old, I could eat this, this, and this. And now that I'm 50, I don't eat that anymore because I'm a 50-year-old and I have to be more conscious of my health. And I said, don't you miss, don't you miss it? Like, isn't it? She's like, oh, of course I miss it. But I'm not going to think about that because I like my health more than I miss, the foods that we were talking about. And the foods aren't important because they were specific to her, but it was important for me to see that sometimes you do have to make choices to give up things that you might like in order to have something that you really want. So there's that first category of choice for me, which is it really something that you need to be doing? Are you willing to make the sacrifices that are necessary to make happen what needs to happen? You can't just will yourself into something. And I know we've talked about this in both of the books. Willpower is a finite resource. That's a well-documented thing. Everybody knows this now. But if you only have 100 pennies of willpower to spend and you pick 10 things to change and go in 10 directions, you're only going to get 10 steps. As a coach, I would rather see you get 100 steps in one direction because you're more likely to assimilate that change long term than to get 10 steps in 10 directions and then have to give up because you're overwhelmed. So that's the first consideration, is to narrow focus. And the second consideration I have just about in general 2020 planning is, what can you quit? There are expectations you have of yourself that are unrealistic and you need to quit some of them. There are things that you need to lay down that you are not going to expect from yourself anymore that are too much. They're causing too much stress. And I don't know what those things are for you, but all of us have them. And so instead of adding things this year, how about we quit some stuff? How about our plan for 2020 is to make realistic expectations for ourselves that we know we can accomplish and then accomplish them? How about our goal for 2020 is to get 100 steps in one direction instead of 10 steps in 10 directions? So that's my challenge, I think, for this year for us in QTP land is, let's QTP the New Year's resolution trend. Let's QTP the 2020 planning if it doesn't work for you. Let's QTP the goal setting if it doesn't work for you, right? Like, if it's not working, if it hasn't worked in the past, there's not a good chance it's going to work now unless that's the only thing that you focus on. And I want to be careful to say, if that's the thing you want to focus on, then focus there. I'm totally fine with that. But let's make sure that we are working with our wiring and with our alignment. And so that's all I have for today. Unfortunately, I could probably talk about this topic for hours and hours and hours. And so if you have questions, please put them in the comments. Tell me something you're going to quit, or tell me the one direction you're going to go 100 steps in the new year. I would love to hear about it. We are going to do one more podcast before the end of the year, and so please check that out next week. I hope that if you celebrate holidays, that you have a happy Hanukkah, that you have a Merry Christmas, that you have a Happy New Year. I hope that everybody has a great holiday who celebrates. And if you don't celebrate, I still hope that you have a great week regardless. And I hope that you'll check out the Dear Writer, You're Doing It Wrong book, and we will see you in the next QuitCast.